GIS linked to a network of coastal observers in the different countries that will produce information in order to take this. So every 5 years, we should be revising the prospective elements to have the global vision, where we go, what are the big risks, the threats, the mistakes, and also try to update the information for each sector, at least for priority sectors where we recommend to weather actions or short-term monitoring to understand the evolution. But still, after this, it belongs to, because of subsidiarity, to each country and to each territory to decide what we want to do.
That's a good point. The map is not the end goal, right? It's a tool for making decisions. It's not just to sit on a shelf and gather dust. It needs to be updated. So we have a map. Okay, we're done. That's not it, right? It's okay. It's to actually do something with it. Right? Yeah, Hillary, I wanted to. If there's something quick, then I wanted to introduce Ed also coming. Yes, please.
Well, I think it's sort of a follow-up to this question and the answer. And that is, as we work as IUCN, I can see here the benefits of a commission which initiates science and develops science. I can see the need for a program that takes science to the members. The question you're asking is now the members on the ground. What do they do with the tools developed through the graduate work of IUCN? So that's where the nations, they're sitting next door in Senegal. Senegal should take this product and see how best it can be used to improve the livelihoods of people on the ground. So I think this is a very good demonstration of the functionality of IUCN working with members, commissions, the secretariat, and of course partners such as you. So it's really a very good case study that can provide congresses. That's how IUCN functions.
Briefly, exactly how to work.
Thank you. Sorry.
That was perfect, Hillary. Thank you for that.
Why are you running for information?
Let me also please welcome Ed Barrow, who's the IUCN Ecosystem Management Program head. Welcome. He's Radhika's boss, who went to another workshop and had to just step out. So Ed is here for the grand finale, I believe, and to add some words of wisdom.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Just a quick comment now on this sort of data stuff. The importance of partnerships. Many countries have good data sets. Where are they? And can we partner with institution X or whatever it might be to use that data? Because often they've got it, it's there, potentially useful in the national interest or whatever interest. So that's one part. There's also quite a lot of free data, as we said. And lastly, I think IUCN has actually renegotiated with ESRI, the GIS for the bump of software licenses, so we don't have to pay that fortune, that $3.5 fortunes to get a license for a year and then have to pay another $30,000. So there are various options. We can explore those options. And just because I don't have the data myself, I can go to Mariam here and ask her, she's got the data, and sending all people work together.
One of my tasks as head of the thematic group for disaster risk reduction for IUCN is to bring forward all of these ideas in terms of ideas of IUCN's next 4 years for moving forward. So I've already gathered lots of ideas from you here today. And I also like to welcome one more newly arrived person to the room. Welcome.
Thank you.
And maybe Ed, would you please introduce Hope? You could do a much better job than myself.
Keeps calling him a Norwegian, but I know he's a Dane.
No.
No, he's a grown-up, let me speak for himself.
Paul is the boss of my boss.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all. My name is Paul Ingrid-Peters, and I'm the Deputy Director General in IUCN, the Managing Director also. And I've been with IUCN for a bit more than a year, and I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, well, we're honored to have somebody from the head of IUCN here to see some of the work we've done here today. I was hoping to do one last exercise with you, but I'm afraid I might be pushing it a little bit. Normally what we do and in this workshop, which is normally 5 days, is that we have time to then actually for a whole afternoon to kind of wrap up with a mapping exercise. Now, oftentimes we have project managers who've been working on a conservation project and have an idea of a mangrove area. And normally what we do then is we have participants map out their area. And then we ask them, well, what are the risks? What are some of the threats? I'm afraid we're maybe pushing it a little bit by trying to do this mapping exercise now. We had fun, we had games today, we had some other exercises. And I'm not sure how many of you are actually managing a project area. I mean, how many of you are actually managing an area? 1, 2, so there are 3, some 4. So 5, yeah? Okay. So I'm afraid that with this group it's a little bit tricky to do that exercise, but if you ever are in a situation where you have this kind of training again, it's actually a good exercise to propose. To draw the land use characteristics just on a simple piece of paper. Map doesn't have to be complex GIS modeling. Mapping can also be done in a very simple way. And it's very powerful to map out your project area and then start thinking about where are the threats, where are they coming from. Are they immediate? Are they man-made? Are they natural? Map them actually in red. And then look at your project area again and say, well, maybe we don't actually want to have the mangrove area here. Maybe we want to move it a little bit further away from something else. So that's also a very powerful tool that you can do in your own projects. But make the decision to skip that right now because I think we're heading towards the end of the day. So we're going to wrap up. It's a little bit difficult, I know, for Paul to come in and not having seen what we've done today, but basically we've been through basic concepts of disaster risk reduction, how to link systems with disaster risk reduction, the two together, and then looking at some really good examples from Japan and also from TNC on some actual responses and how do we do some tools. We also had a presentation from Gonzalo on community participation and linking natural resource management and disaster risk reduction. Another talk by James Dalton on integrated water resource management and linking those. It's hard for me to sum up all the things we've done today. We're looking at some of the realities. Ecosystem management is not a silver bullet. It's not the only approach. Sometimes we have to be realistic and look at the trade-offs. Sometimes we need hard infrastructure for areas that are densely populated. But what we found in traditional disaster risk management is often the ecosystem component is not considered. So the challenge to the conservation community is to reach out to those actors with whom we don't normally interact. It's a new opportunity. And this training is something that we normally offer 5 days. It was offered in Georgia recently, where we invited both disaster risk managers, environmental managers. We try to get mixed also with development planners, because we talked about how disasters is often a development issue. So we try to get people from all of these different communities to come together. And if they leave with at least one thing, it's maybe that they have new contacts, they might work together afterwards, maybe some new ideas, which is what I'm hoping that you've gotten out of this today, maybe some new ideas. So I'm going to ask Paul for some comments, some remarks, and then Ed to close the session. Before you leave, we also have some memory sticks. We had one more person come in that I didn't introduce. I'm sorry. Please introduce yourself. Yeah, I'm sorry. Georgia. You're also welcome.
I anyway wanted to join you.
Okay.
So I'm saying from the Georgia. Right? Which is project and German government. So I am directed to protected areas, protected areas, info assistance, and it operates in Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. And I'm coordinator in Georgia.
Okay. Thank you. have some closing remarks by Paul, by Ed, and then I want to give you the memory sticks as some materials for you to bring home, okay? So it's the PowerPoints from today, and then lots of documents so that you have lots of reading on the airplane home, at least as long as your computer battery is able to run. Okay, please.
Thanks very much. Do you want me to stand here or where? Here's all right.
It's fine. I think your voice carries well enough.
I'm really sorry I couldn't be with you the whole day, but happy to be here. Allow me to just say a few words about myself, because I think I followed a little bit of the same trajectory that also the work on ecosystem-based disaster reduction has. I started out in 1977 in Ethiopia working with refugees. And Ethiopia and refugees that time was a human disaster, but it was also a political disaster. Well, that's human. But it was certainly also a natural resource disaster in many ways. As you know, Ethiopia were in the news often for starvation and so on. Having been there, I moved into development. So starting in human response, disaster response, moving into development, and then I spent my entire life until last year in development work. And it's and not only last year did I come into natural resource management and conservation issues with IUC. It's actually interesting that back when I started, I'm so much older than all of you, except Pete perhaps, I don't know. When I started, you had three completely different boxes. You had a disaster response box that was dealt by some organizations, including the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees I was working for, the Red Cross and so on. You had a development box, which included World Bank and the bilateral agencies and a lot of NGOs also there. And you had some conservationists up there somewhere, right? More or less in the field. Really not on the agenda, if we are quite honest. Completely different. Nothing, no overlap. Everybody were working in different fields, had no communication. Then we started identifying the gaps, because what did the people who dealt with disaster, I'm sure you discussed this today, what did the people working on disaster response? They were rebuilding within a maximum of 6 months time perspective. I'm sure you discussed this today. But they had a very brief time perspective. And they were not allowed to even think longer term. So we started, but they did move into recovery. And when they started working on recovery, it started getting a little bit more difficult to see what was actually the gap to development. And we started talking about gray zones, the gray zones between disaster response and development. And people recognized this doesn't make sense. And you saw then, as you always do in this field, a chaotic running of the organizations that had been working with disaster response and those with development, trying to grab each other's fields and moving into a very complex situation, and very often not very effective. And in my perspective, still the conservationists were not there, but we did, I moved into development, and we did in the development field do rural development. When we did rural development, we did look at natural resources, and that's what we still do today with water resource management, forest programs, and so on. So that has continued. Now to make a long story short, what has happened and what you have been discussing today is, the reason is of course very sad, because it's induced by climate change, it's induced by very huge critical challenges, ecological challenges. But the positive thing of that is that we are suddenly now seeing this that you've been discussing today, new thinking on how do we actually adapt to these challenges. And when you start talking about adaptation to climate change, it really is not different from development. It's very difficult to see where, at least in my perspective, you might have discussed, I would like to hear if you have discussed and reach other conclusions. But from my perspective, it's very different difficult to see a difference between adaptation to climate change and an ecosystem-based adaptation and development. It's more or less the same things that we are addressing and the same things that we're doing. We are now with a new program, I think, IUCN program, if Congress approves it, we are then also getting the link, closing the gap between the conservationists and development people much more. And I think that the ecosystem-based, because we're working with ecosystems, with ecosystem services, we are really closing the link also between development and conservation. We should have done that decades ago through sustainable development, but that has not been implemented in practice. I think we can now bring these communities together and do it in practice. And it's almost ironical that what you've been discussing and what Ed is heading in our secretariat, the ecosystem-based adaptation, has been forced on, what do you call it? It's emerged as a consequence and a response to crisis, but it's actually very innovative, and it is a much better way of addressing the issues. So what it gets to is the landscape focus, and the seascape focus that is really a priority. And the last thing you were saying, I think about mapping, also points to that. This is the way we have to deal with these issues. They overlap totally. And that will be my final point in just a second. They overlap totally. Starting from these totally separate boxes is now brought really together at the landscape level, where we are then looking at how can we make sure that people can cope and that they are able to adapt to the various crises and prevent the disasters from happening. This is the way it's being integrated now. To get back to my Ethiopia story, our starting point, it's not a story. When I was in Ethiopia in 1977, as a very young man, there were 27 million people in Ethiopia. Now, they don't know whether there are 80 or 90 million, but somewhere in that range, million people. In the same country. I don't know how many of you have been to Ethiopia. You know that apart from having the most beautiful people in the world, they also have a lot of mountains, and they have very, very, very difficult landscape. It's really difficult to do agriculture, to do adaptation to all the changing climate that is coming in now, plus all the political changes they have on top. So whenever I think about how should we do development, adaptation, disaster risk reduction, I always think about households on top of a mountain in Ethiopia, because they have survived. These households, they've survived throughout centuries and more on what we would consider a totally impossible natural resource foundation. And that totally impossible natural resource foundation, they're used to all the changes, but that totally impossible natural resource foundation has become much worse because they moved from 27 million to 85 or 90 million people on the same land at a time when climate change is being hit on top of them. So you have longer droughts, you have more rain coming in the wrong time of the year, all these issues like that. So when we in IUCN, when you go out and do your disaster risk reduction and your landscape planning, your area-based planning, please remember and always start, how do the families who live on top of these mountains, how do they do it? How have they managed over the millennia to actually cope with these things? Because they've done it. And I know we used to call it coping mechanism. I'm not sure whether that's allowed to use that concept anymore, but I still think it's an appropriate concept. How do you cope with such amazing changes happening to your livelihood, which you do not control because they are related to climate, they are related to political, they are related to where you're living, and you have a household which is growing, there are more and more people, and the land is becoming less, and the soil is becoming destroyed, and so on. So whenever I do go home in the flights and having finished reading all your good documents, I keep thinking about what can we learn from the people who are coping on top of a mountain in Ethiopia. So that's my personal story, which I take along with me from 1977. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, for those words. Ed, did you have some remarks?
Just follow up with Paul. Maybe we come from similar history in a way. Long time ago, not quite as long as that, I was working in a place called Chakana district. And indeed I was a Norwegian civil servant, even though I'm Irish. He was a Norwegian civil servant, he's Danish. And we were working in Chakana. I then moved to a place called ICRAF, the International Centre for Research in Agroforestry. And they asked me to do a presentation on what I was going to do there. So I said at the end, cheekily, I said, the Chakana people, pastoralists, illiterate maybe they may be, unable to write, perhaps, or whatever else, not reading, they know more about their trees, their natural resources, their coping mechanisms, than the whole of ICRAF put together, the whole of all these PhDs put together. And I dared any one of those PhDs, those eminent scientists, to challenge me. Nobody did. And it just goes to show